Hello and welcome to NTD News Today. Kevin Hogan here. Let's take a look at our top stories. The Senate starting work on the $1 trillion infrastructure bill. What do they plan to spend the most on and how do they plan to pay for it? Tensions are running high in the House and around the country over mask and vaccine mandates, as well as potential new lockdown measures. A new mask mandate in the House of Representatives set off a war of words among lawmakers. The auditors have finished counting all of the ballots in Maricopa County, Arizona. That's while the DOJ is warning states not to violate federal law by carrying out audits. And Team USA swimmers take home gold, silver, and bronze medals. Amid their Olympic success, they voice empathy for pole vaulter Sam Kendricks, who tested positive for COVID-19. Senators now debating the $1 trillion bipartisan infrastructure deal. They voted to advance it last night after President Biden and a bipartisan group of senators agreed on major parts of the package. NTD's Jessica Beatty reports.
The Senate voted Wednesday night to start work on the $1 trillion bipartisan infrastructure package.
The Senate has just come together and in a strong bipartisan fashion.
President Biden welcomed the news. In a statement, he said, "This deal signals to the world that our democracy can function, deliver, and do big things." 17 Republican senators joined Democrats in voting to launch the debate. The lead Republican negotiator says it's an important first step, even though there are challenges ahead.
Every American believes that roads and bridges, ports and waterways, even our digital infrastructure needs to be updated. They know it because they travel on those roads, go to those bridges.
It has a hefty price tag of $550 billion in new spending. The bill holding huge cash for roads and bridges, modernizing the electric grid and expanding renewable energy, passenger and freight rail, and high-speed internet, among many other things.
We're touching every element of infrastructure. If you're on the rails, if you're in a car, if you're basically wanting to get on internet, your bridges and your roads, everything, airports, we've touched everything here.
They plan to pay for it by repurposing unspent virus relief and unemployment aid, selling broadcast spectrum, reinstating cleanup fees for chemical companies, and reversing a Trump-era pharmaceutical rebate, among other sources. Democrats face a timeline to act.
My goal remains to pass both the bipartisan infrastructure bill and a budget resolution during this work period. Both. It might take some long nights. It might eat into our weekends. But we are going to get the job done, and we are on track.
The final deal could run into trouble if it isn't fully paid for when the Congressional Budget Office looks at the details. It's also unclear if enough senators will eventually vote to pass the final bill. Meanwhile, Democrats are also working on the broader $3.5 trillion package. It's being considered under budget rules that only need a simple majority. That means Democrats can push it through without any Republican support. It would be paid for by increasing taxes on corporations and Americans who earn more than $400,000 a year. Jessica Beatty, NTD News.
Republicans in Congress and around the country are pushing back against a new wave of CCP virus mandates and lockdowns. The conflict set off a war of words between House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy. NTD's Don Ma has the story.
The Capitol's attending physician Brian Monahan issued a mask mandate for the House of Representatives Tuesday, including for people who've already been vaccinated. The new rules set off a war of words between Democrat and Republican lawmakers Wednesday. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi called Republican Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy a moron after he tweeted criticism of the new rule. McCarthy returned fire.
This is no different than her telling people they couldn't go out, but she's getting her hair done. Just today I watched her in a private meeting not wearing a mask. So, do as you say, but not as she does.
Pelosi accused Republicans of going against science on vaccines and mask wearing.
Science is the answer, whether it's the climate crisis, whether it's a health crisis, whether it's our preeminence in the world in technology, science, 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 science.
The CDC issued new guidance Tuesday, saying Americans should wear masks indoors in areas where there are high rates of virus transmission. McCarthy says the new mask rules for the House don't match CDC guidance, and they aren't about science.
We are vaccinated, we're not a hot spot, but they're forcing you to wear a mask? Not in the Senate, but in the House. This is just about more control. This is just the beginning of a set, because school's going to start coming back, they're going to shut school down again. This is about control.
Republican governors are also pushing back against mandates from the federal government. Speaking to the American Legislative Exchange Council, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis says governments shouldn't take away the freedom of Americans to make decisions for themselves.
And I think it's very important that we say unequivocally no to lockdowns, no to school closures, no to restrictions, and no mandates.
DeSantis bureaucrats are trying to decide how Americans should live.
Consigned to live in a Faucian dystopia in which we're governed by the whims of bureaucratic authorities who care little for our freedom, little for our aspirations, and little for our happiness. No more.
Pelosi says there shouldn't be a discussion about the new rules, and members of Congress should just follow the guidance of the Capitol physician. The CDC says the studies supporting their new mask guidance aren't available yet. Don Ma, NTD News.
Emergency actions in the fight against COVID-19. Every day this week, President Biden's administration has made moves designed to make a dent in this pandemic.
Is the president confident he can get the unvaccinated to change their minds?
We have to.
And he's pushing to do just that. Monday, news that vaccines will be required for healthcare workers at the Department of Veterans Affairs. Tuesday, new mask recommendations from the CDC for people who live in areas with substantial or high transmission of COVID-19. Right now, that's more than 75% of the country. Starting Wednesday, the White House asked all federal agencies to require masks indoors in those areas with substantial or high transmission. And today, the president will lay out his next steps to ramp up vaccinations and take down variants. He's expected to announce new guidelines for federal workers. Officials say they'd be required to share their vaccination status. People who aren't vaccinated wouldn't be let go, but they would have to wear a mask and submit to regular testing. And there could be additional requirements at some point. But none of this is expected to be imposed on the U.S. military. And sources say the Department of Justice is also weighing the legality of companies requiring employees to get shots. A number already have, including Google, Facebook, Netflix, Saks Fifth Avenue, The Washington Post, Lyft, and Twitter. And the list is growing.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says President Biden doesn't have the legal authority to forgive student loans. She notes that student loan debt forgiveness can only be enforced by Congress, but other top Democrats have said otherwise.
During a daily press conference on Wednesday, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi noted that President Biden has no legal authority to cancel student loans. She explained that he can postpone, he can delay, but he does not have that power. That would be an act of Congress. Her comment may trigger pushback from some Democrat lawmakers. For months, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has issued near-daily tweets insisting that Biden forgive all student loans. On Tuesday, Schumer, Senator Elizabeth Warren, and Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley called on the president to extend a pause on student loan payments and move on forgiving debts. Schumer said that the president has existing legal authority to cancel up to $50,000 in debt. But some moderates say canceling student loan debt would be unfair to those who have already paid theirs. Senator John Tester told reporters earlier this year that I'm not inclined to support because a lot of people have worked very, very hard to pay off their debts, and this would set a bad example. While Senator Joe Manchin noted his concern about how the government would pay for that much student loan forgiveness. In March, the Department of Education canceled $1 billion in student loan debt for about 72,000 borrowers. That's after repealing a Trump-era policy.
Auditors in Maricopa County finished their third count of the ballots. Now they're going to shift to drafting up a report on the results. This while the DOJ notes that audits that are either complete or in progress are unusual and exceedingly rare. It notes federal law that imposes constraints on when audits can take place. The third count of ballots in Maricopa County was completed in Phoenix under the supervision of a former Arizona Republican Party chair. That's according to Arizona Senate President Karen Fann. She said the tabulation of the ballots is complete and they're being returned to Maricopa County on Thursday. The data is now going to be sent to their labs for analysis with a final report expected next month. Florida-based Cyber Ninjas finished the initial hand tally last month. That was for the 2.1 million ballots cast in the general election in 2020. They needed a third set of numbers because what Maricopa County reported and the initial recount didn't match, according to Fan. The Board of Supervisors for Maricopa County have criticized the auditors, saying the methods used were flawed and would produce incorrect results. In the third count, workers only tabulated the number of ballots. That's opposed to what the auditors in county did by marking down some or all of the votes. At the same time, the Department of Justice highlighted two laws. Those are the Civil Rights Act of 1960 involving election records and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 about intimidation of voters. In June, AG Merrick Garland said the DOJ would focus in part on scrutinizing audits. That's to make sure they comply with federal laws. Fan said the DOJ's guidance could be a way they're using to stop or discredit the audit. A DOJ official told reporters that the reason they're issuing this guidance referencing these laws is that they want to warn states that audits need to be conducted in a way that doesn't intimidate voters. Cyber Ninja's CEO recommended that the audit should include door-to-door canvassing of households where questionable votes came from. But that plan was put on hold after a DOJ official expressed concerns to Fan about possible voter intimidation. The Arizona audit has led to lawmakers and election integrity groups in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Georgia to initiate a review of the 2020 election. Gun manufacturer Remington is offering $33 million to the families of the victims of the Sandy Hook school shooting. That's $3.66 million for each of 9 plaintiffs. The families will now decide whether or not to accept the offer. Remington previously argued that they were immune from claims, but a Superior Court judge rejected their argument. Lawyers for the plaintiff say that Remington employees knew that unfit individuals could get access to their weapons and inflict carnage. 26 people were killed when a gunman opened fire at Sandy Hook Elementary School in 2012. 20 of the victims were children. Remington filed for bankruptcy last year. If their offer isn't accepted, the case could proceed to trial. Survivors of the Florida building collapse are getting the help they need to have a place to live. A charity is making sure they can have a year's worth of rent paid. Florida-based charity Global Empowerment Mission and its partners announced they will pay the first and last month's rent and security deposits at new apartments for survivors. They have raised over $370,000. Global Empowerment Mission had already secured free temporary housing and donated goods for the survivors. The charity and its partners believe they will soon have the funds to pay for the survivors' rent for a whole year. Global Empowerment Mission's founder says the group's goal is to help fill the gap between the short-term help that arrives immediately after a disaster and the long-term solutions through insurance and legal settlements that can take a year or more to develop. For some survivors, the press conference was the first time they had seen each other since right after the collapse. A magnitude 8.2 earthquake and numerous aftershocks strike off the Alaskan peninsula and trigger a tsunami warning. Warning sirens echoed through inland streets. The quake struck in the evening at 10:15 local time, 56 miles southeast of Perryville, Alaska. The U.S. Geological Service reports its origin at 20 miles deep. Shortly following the quake, the National Weather Service issued a tsunami warning that covers South Alaska and the Alaska Peninsula Pacific coasts, as well as the Aleutian Islands. The agency also issued a tsunami advisory for surrounding areas, including a tsunami watch for Hawaii. Those in the tsunami warning areas are advised to evacuate inland or to higher ground. Residents can visit tsunami.gov for updated information. Just ahead, flight attendants are stepping up for a new kind of training, self-defense. That's as reports of unruly passengers are on the rise, many of them tied to the federal transportation mask mandate. And one rare bird species is making a comeback, helped along by eased pandemic restrictions. For the whooping crane, the return of breeders and carers is making all the difference. That and more here on NTD News. As more people take to the skies, airlines are seeing more reports of unruly passengers. Most of these incidents are related to the federal transportation mask mandate. It's gotten to a point where flight attendants are learning to self-defense to protect themselves. Here's more.
They are taking a defensive stance against a growing problem in the air. Flight attendants are training to hit, elbow, and gouge simulated aggressive passengers, with actual passengers getting more violent than ever.
You are going to possibly die. You need to defend yourself at all costs.
Undercover federal air marshals are guiding 8 flight attendants through this self-defense course, the first class offered by the TSA since training was paused by the pandemic.
It's sad that it needs to happen.
Flight attendant Carrie is taking this class, having just returned to her airline following a leave of absence.
Are you scared?
Sometimes, a little bit, yeah. You get on a plane full of people and some of them aren't very happy and you just never know what's going to happen.
A brawl breaking out on a Frontier Airlines flight is among the latest unruly passenger incidents that the FAA says are skyrocketing. Federal documents detail how passengers have shouted down, grabbed, and struck flight attendants thousands of times since the start of a zero-tolerance policy earlier this year. In May, a passenger punched a Southwest Airlines flight attendant, causing her to lose 2 of her teeth, according to her union.
There's no backup at 30,000 feet. So that plane is in the air, that has a crew that has to deal with the issues, and it's incumbent on us to make sure they're fully equipped.
It's so bad out there.
Sarah Nelson of the Association of Flight Attendants says airlines should pay their people to take these classes, and the federal government should require that flight crews attend each year.
That we can have that muscle memory and be able to respond when someone is immediately attacking us.
Ready? Move!
Here, instructors are teaching techniques that could be life-saving, like pinning an attacker who is armed with a knife. But the TSA says only a few hundred people have enrolled in this course after it reopened training in late June. Veteran flight attendant Donna O'Neill says more like her should take this class to deal with a type of passenger becoming too common.
All right, ready? Move!
I don't ever want to have to use any of this, but you know, if I had to, I certainly feel much more confident.
Johnson & Johnson is facing a new lawsuit over products linked to cancer and allegedly marketed to black women. An advocacy group filed the suit Tuesday. It accuses J&J of selectively marketing talcum-based products, including baby powder, to black women despite knowing for years the items were linked to ovarian cancer. The pharma giant denies the allegation. The company sold talc-based powder for more than 100 years before issuing a recall of 33,000 bottles in 2019. J&J discontinued sale of the powder in the U.S. and Canada in 2020, though it said it would allow existing inventory to be sold until it runs out. Attorneys for the National Council of Negro Women filed the suit in the Superior Court of New Jersey. The Food and Drug Administration has officially designated the first generic type of insulin. It's called Semglee, and it was approved to be sold in the U.S. last year. But Wednesday's move by the FDA allows the product to be marketed as a generic version of a biological product. This could be a help to some diabetics, as insulin prices have been rising steadily due to little competition. The FDA says Semglee is a safe and less expensive alternative to treating the disease. The pandemic halted life for more than just humans. As safety rules relax, endangered species programs are starting up again. One bird, the whooping crane, already back on track. Here's more.
The whooping crane, the world's most endangered crane, once hunted almost to extinction and further endangered by a virus that targets humans. At the Freeport McMoran Audubon Center, the pandemic shut down hatching and breeding and sent animal caregivers home. But now, with CCP virus rules relaxing, the center's species survival efforts are back on track. After a barren 2020, the center hatched 7 chicks this year, 1 more than in 2019.
The ability to be able to do what we normally do out here on a day-to-day basis was reduced quite a bit with lack of staff. So that was very hard for us last year, and as a result, we didn't have any whooping crane hatchings here last year.
After hatching, the bird's rearing proves unique. Caregivers dress in baggy white jumpsuits with crane head puppets on one arm, the puppet demonstrating how to pick up insects and passing the tasty morsels to chicks. Checkups and other tasks are done in plain clothes, so the chicks know to avoid humans in the wild.
So our staff here are dressing up as a crane in a costume to help raise with a puppet and raise these chicks so that they don't imprint on the human form itself.
From just about 15 whooping crane parents, Today, there exist over 800 offspring in the world. At the center, most of the hatchlings come from the wilds of Wisconsin. Although they're given alphanumeric names when released, the staff have their own names for the babies: Blizzard, Fog, Hurricane, Lava, Lightning, Tornado, and the only female, Aurora. Aurora, hatched through artificial insemination, is the only bird being raised by her stepfather and mother, although she's temporarily hospitalized after chipping her beak on the center's chain-link fence.
And they're growing like weeds. Right now they're hitting major milestones of wing feathers. Their primary feathers are growing in, and they're getting growth spurts where they're shooting up in weight and height.
At 5 feet high, these birds are the tallest in North America. The long-legged, fuzzy brown chicks grow into mottled brown and white juveniles, emerging into adults with black wingtips and red caps. They are raised across the U.S. and Canada in facilities from New Orleans to Calgary, migrating from Texas to Alberta after returning to the wild.
Coming up, a desalination plant in California faces regulatory hurdles. Environmentalists oppose it, arguing it's too expensive and will hurt marine life. All that and more in just a minute.
Hi folks, Joe Namath here with a new message about your Medicare benefits. You may be entitled to transportation, meals, and expanded coverage for dental work that includes extractions, fillings, and dentures, all at no additional cost. Plus, depending on your zip code, you may be entitled to the Medicare benefit that adds money to your Social Security check every single month. Call and get everything you deserve. Call now. It's free.
I'm on a fixed income, so I called to get money added to my Social Security check. They helped me so much.
I called to save money on co-pays, get prescriptions, transportation, and my dental work covered. I couldn't believe I was spending money I don't have to spend.
Millions of people have trusted the Medicare Coverage Helpline, and you can too. Call now. It's free.
Call 1-800-764-1930. That's 1-800-764-1930 now.
Peace comes from within. I am the light of the world. He who follows me shall not walk in darkness, but have the light of life. The human body is the temple of God, and religion is the experience of God within yourself. Are you ready to discover the truth within yourself? Book an appointment now at divinelight.com.
Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
Environmentalists say desalination decimates ocean life and costs too much money. But as Western states face an epic drought, regulators appear ready to approve a desalination plant in Huntington Beach, California. NTD's Andrew Thomas reports.
Poseidon Water has spent 22 years and $100 million navigating a thicket of state regulations and environmentalist challenges. The $1.4 billion plant would produce some 50 million gallons of drinking water daily. But one major regulatory hurdle remains: the California Coastal Commission. The agency is expected to vote on Poseidon's permit application before the end of the year. California's water wars date back to at least the late 19th century. This latest chapter shows grassroots movements can delay plans, if not halt them. Down the coast, Poseidon's Carlsbad plant produces 50 million gallons of drinking water daily. Enough for 400,000 homes, meaning 10% of San Diego County's water demand. It is the Western Hemisphere's largest desalination plant. The Huntington Beach project would produce enough for 16% of the homes in the Orange County Water District, where 2.5 million people live. But conservationists say better alternatives include repairing leaky pipes, capturing stormwater runoff, and committing to more recycled water.
And desalinated water is not the way to go. Again, this is the most expensive way to source water, is the most energy intensive way to do it, and the way it decimates the ocean, both by the intake and by how we're dumping brine back into the ocean, is really not, it should be the last resort.
At the Carlsbad plant, ocean water is run through pipes to remove the largest solids, then pumped to reverse osmosis filters to remove salt. The intake kills tiny organisms such as larvae and plankton, and the salty brine left over after the process can harm bottom-dwelling marine life. But Poseidon says the impact is minimal.
The impacts from the intake of seawater for the purposes of desalination is the entrainment of microscopic organisms. In the case of Huntington Beach, the total quantity of impact would be no more than 0.02% of the plankton at risk of being entrained. There's no threatened or endangered species that are at risk.
Experts say more research is needed to determine how much sea life is actually destroyed. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
Students and staff planning to enter any California State University campus may need to be vaccinated. The CSU system announced it for the upcoming fall season. Here's NTD's David Lamb with the report.
On Tuesday, the CSU system said it will require students, faculty, and staff to be vaccinated against COVID-19 or the CCP virus in order to access its on-campus facilities. The CSU system, along with the University of California system, previously decided in April to wait until one of the vaccines was fully FDA approved. But with the next academic school year coming, and according to the press release, new cases regarding the Delta variant prompted the system to move forward without waiting for the FDA. The CSU system is the largest public four-year higher education system in the country. It has over 500,000 students and faculty and over 23 campuses. Under the CSU's vaccination policy, students and staff will have to verify their vaccination status. The date may vary depending on the campus, but certifications are required no later than September 30th. Students and staff may seek medical and religious exemptions. Now, for students who don't plan on coming to campus, the system expects most campuses to offer more virtual courses. The final policy is expected to be released in the coming days. David Lamb, NTD News, California.
Still to come, more information is surfacing about the flood casualties in China's central city. A 15-year-old tells her story of being trapped in a subway car. And an insider from an insurance company sheds some light on questions surrounding the flood. How many subway cars were submerged in water, and why are the windows covered up in black? Find out more here on NTD News. The U.S. Navy sent this warship through the international waters separating China and the island of Taiwan. It comes as tense conversations happen between the U.S. and China. The missile destroyer conducted a routine sail through the Taiwan Strait in accordance with international law. This journey demonstrates the U.S. commitment to a free and open Indo-Pacific. According to the U.S. Navy's 7th Fleet, the U.S. military flies, sails, and operates anywhere international law allows. This marks the 7th Taiwan Strait transit in 2021. There were 13 in 2020. The British Foreign Secretary says it's unlikely he would go to the 2022 Winter Olympics in Beijing. He says it's due to human rights concerns around the situation in Xinjiang.
Well, we always say with this, that we've asked this question about whether we would boycott because of human rights concerns in Xinjiang. That's the ultimate background to the question. First of all, for the athletes themselves, the Olympic Committee take those decisions. That's a matter of law, so those are independent. The reason we do that is we don't want to politicise sport. In terms of the diplomatic representation that we apply, I think we'll think very carefully about it. We do have those concerns, and I said I think it was unlikely that I would go. But we haven't taken a firm decision on that yet.
The United States is consulting allies on a shared approach to the Winter Olympics in Beijing amid criticism of the Chinese Communist regime and calls for boycotts over human rights abuses. Last week, a bipartisan group of U.S. lawmakers called on the International Olympic Committee to postpone the 2022 Winter Olympics and relocate the event unless the Chinese regime ends its ongoing genocide against Uyghurs and other Muslim minority groups. Rights groups, researchers, former residents, and some Western officials have said Xinjiang authorities have facilitated forced labor and other abuses. A 15-year-old survivor gives an account of her experience in the flooded subway in Henan, China, where she was trapped alongside dead bodies. And new information is circulating on Chinese social media that there could be as many as 90 subway cars submerged in the flood. NTD's Tiffany Meyer has more of the details.
A 15-year-old survivor is opening up after escaping a deadly subway car incident. In a self-recorded video, she explains. That's after she and her parents got trapped inside a flooded subway train car in China's ZhengZhou city, along the Metro Line 5 route last Tuesday. They were inside the last carriage, the hardest hit by floodwaters. A video circulating online shows the scene, with riders gasping for air inside the sealed subway car. The survivor says the severe lack of oxygen inside knocked out many of the passengers. She recounts.
这次事故死了很多人，死了10几个人，都是一个一个亲眼看到的。大家死亡的原因都是缺氧，严重缺氧。
Video clips show the water rose to the passengers' necks. Many of them were seen calling to their families to say goodbye. One victim was nearby the young survivor at the time. The woman called her mother, gave her the family bank card password, and passed away not long after. The survivor recalls severe pain in her chest and says she wasn't able to breathe. Her father also went into shock several times and lost consciousness. What's more, she later learned from fellow riders that authorities had announced that all trapped passengers had been safely evacuated. The news shocked her. Pointing out the irony, she witnessed the passengers around her suffocate, yet the masses were being told they had all been rescued. Official reports released while the riders were still trapped read, "At present, the trapped passengers have been evacuated safely." The young survivor points out that after she was rescued, she saw many people lying on the train platform, noting, "I think most of them are dead." The accident's official death toll now stands at 14. Before the disaster, Chinese authorities are suspected of releasing floodwaters to lessen pressure on upstream reservoirs. That came amid heavy rainfall in central China. But the immense water flow inundated the ZhengZhou subway line. The city is home to 5 million people. As videos spread online following the subway flood disaster, one unusual clip is drawing attention. It captures survivors as they recount the horrors of being trapped inside the flooded train cars. But in the video, someone seemingly tried to stop them from detailing what they went through. A man there suddenly interrupted the conversation. The survivors left the scene before answering the final question. Where are the flooded subway cars in ZhengZhou? On Monday, local residents spotted at least 4 trains being dragged out and transported elsewhere. The windows were all covered with black cloth. And a day later, the subway cars were spotted on a highway. A netizen took a close-up. All the openings in the windows were covered with black cloth. Even the numbers on each door were covered. The destination, unknown. Some netizens question what are the authorities covering up and how many subway cars were submerged in water. Chinese authorities did not publish any figures. But a netizen on Chinese social media Weibo wrote one of his friends works at a local insurance company, and he told him that a total of 91 subway cars have been soaked, and his company has to pay at least $600 million in compensation. New evidence emerges surrounding China's flood disasters. Some claim Chinese authorities sent the military to destroy local river embankments designed to block floodwaters.
部队这些人承认了，他们来到这儿才知道是来炸河堤的，他们干了这些人，看到没？承认了，来这儿炸河堤的。
Videos circulating online appear to show soldiers in Henan Province's Xinxiang city caught by locals in the middle of the night. The video comes after a local river overflowed last week. Because of water released from a reservoir upstream, the flooding has not yet receded. Water levels are still rising in the city, and more rainfall is expected in the coming days.
China appears to be expanding its nuclear capabilities. New satellite images show what researchers say is a new missile base in China's Xinjiang region. Released alongside a report by the Federation of American Scientists, researchers say it signals China's potential expansion of its nuclear arsenal, calling into question Beijing's commitment to its minimum deterrence strategy. It's the second apparent silo field uncovered this month in China after another field was found under construction in neighboring Gansu province. China's Foreign Ministry and Defense Ministry have not responded to a request for comment. Some Chinese media outlets dismissed the reports, suggesting it was a wind farm. Next up, robots. Not simple lifted desks or smart business assistants, but something in between. Suits for people to walk in. Stay tuned for more.
It's a very fragile moment the artist captured in these sort of icy light, but it warms up when it hits her face, her skin. You can see the artist's love for her daughter and how gentle the light is on her face and how sweet she looks. She's wearing very light colors and she has a very serene expression on her face, and she's kind of lightly smiling, even though she's sleeping and she has no idea what's going on. We can tell how careful she was to paint, even like the twigs and, the blades of grass so carefully and detailed, and just the care that she put into it. The artist was also painting this for herself, going through this tribulation where she didn't know if she was going to get through this health crisis or not. So there's a little bit of her daughter's very fragile life, kind of signifying her own. She was able to depict something that was very difficult for her in a graceful way. I think the viewer can get a sense of something that's very pure from the painting. There are 2 sparrows in it. The idea is that if God even knows when a bird dies, and you're worth so much more than that, it's about the value of human life in the eyes of God and how precious we should treat that.
The Ever Given container ship, which blocked the Suez Canal for nearly a week in March, finally arrived in the Dutch port of Rotterdam early this morning. The vessel disrupted one of the world's busiest waterways and caused a major backlog in global trade. It was grounded on March 23rd and remained impounded for more than 3 months by the Suez Canal Authority during a dispute over compensation with its owners. Now, the 1,300-foot-long boat has ended a 3-week journey to the Dutch port of Rotterdam, carrying more than 18,000 containers. On Monday, it will then continue its voyage to a British container port. In Paris, France, a company is building robots for the disabled. A father inspired by his son's condition makes him an exoskeleton. Here's more.
A father and son duo in Paris are working to help the disabled walk again, or perhaps for the first time ever. With help from robots, Jean-Louis Constanza is one of the founders of the Wandercraft company. Inspired by families with members in wheelchairs, they make exoskeletons, bodysuits for people to walk in.
Two of the founders, including myself, have loved ones in our family in wheelchairs. For me, it's my son Oscar. And one day he said to me, "Dad, you're a robotic engineer. Why don't you make a robot that will help me to walk?"
Oscar Constanza, Jean-Louis's 16-year-old son, was born with a neurological condition. He has never been able to walk and now spends his time helping his father aid others like him. Without him, the project may never have been launched.
It's new for me because before, to walk, I've always had assistance, and now I no longer need assistance, so I feel independent.
Jean-Louis says he believes that human beings are meant to be upright, walking. He says it's important for our health and our well-being, adding that in another 10 years there will be far fewer wheelchairs. Instead, he says exoskeletons or outer frames that support and simulate body movement will replace them.
Right now, I'm looking at you at eye level, and that's because we're standing. That's the first thing to give back to people, and I think we owe them that. Because I think before making autonomous cars, we should have autonomous walking.
Kevin Piette is a 33-year-old paraplegic who lost the use of his legs in a biking accident 10 years ago. He's now one of Wandercraft's testers. He says with the exoskeleton, he's more comfortable looking people in the eye. For him, the suit brings great benefits to the body, and he believes many others will also be pleased with the possibilities.
It is quite different because when you walk normally, you yourself are controlling your walk. But in the end, how it functions is quite similar. It's as if I send the information from my brain to my legs, except that in this case, the orders comes from the remote control.
Wandercraft's exoskeleton is multi-purpose, from helping disabled people walk to relieving factory workers long hours on their feet. They're being sold to dozens of hospitals in France, Luxembourg, and the United States, priced at nearly $180,000 per suit.
Coming up, a U.S. world champion pole vaulter has to leave the Tokyo Olympics due to a positive CCP virus test. It caused a scare among Australia's track and field team, who he'd been training with. Find out more in just a minute. Members of Team USA's swim team are taking home some hardware after a spectacular Olympic performance. NTD's Andrew Thomas reports.
After collecting gold, silver, and bronze medals this week in Tokyo, members of the Team USA swim team were still at a loss for words.
I don't know what other words I can use to describe this right now, and I hope I'm able to relish in this moment and hopefully realize what this means.
Schmidt shared a silver medal with teammates Catherine McLaughlin, Paige Madden, and Katie Ledecky for the women's 4x200-meter freestyle relay on Thursday. She earned a bronze in the 4x100 on Sunday. Haley Flickinger earned a bronze in the women's 200-meter butterfly and in the women's 400-meter individual medley, while 19-year-old Reagan Smith took silver in the women's 200-meter butterfly. But Team USA did endure a setback out of the pool, after pole vaulter Sam Kendricks tested positive for COVID. The swimmers expressed empathy and disappointment.
I personally, I'm devastated for him. I feel for him. I don't really know him personally, but from what I've heard and read is he was a serious medal contender. And like all of us, this is probably his lifelong dream to be here. So it certainly is a sad situation.
For the men, Chase Kalish won the gold medal in the 400-meter individual medley on Sunday. Caleb Dressel won the 100-meter freestyle in 47.02 seconds, setting a new Olympic record. Bobby Fink also won a gold on Thursday, completing the 800-meter freestyle in 7 minutes, 41.87 seconds. Fink charged through the final length, after being outside the top 3 before the last turn. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
American champion pole vaulter Sam Kendricks has been ruled out of the Olympics after testing positive for COVID-19, and members of the Australian team are going into isolation today.
Australian media reported that Kendricks had been training with Australia's Curtis Marshall. As a precaution, some of Australia's track and field athletes isolated in their rooms as they awaited their own test results. Australia's Olympic Committee released a statement later on Thursday, confirming that the athletes had received the all-clear. Games procedures state that athletes who are contact traced and have not yet competed are isolated from the rest of the squad. They then have to be tested 6 hours prior to their competition and return a negative result in order to compete. United States Olympic and athletic officials confirmed Kendrick's positive test and said that he had been transferred to a hotel to be placed in isolation. Kendricks won the world title in 2017 and 2019, and Olympic bronze in Rio 2016. His battle with world record holder Armand Duplantis of Sweden was expected to have been one of the highlights of the track and field program. Another pole vaulter, Germán Chiaraviglio of Argentina, was also ruled out after testing positive for the CCP virus.
Players are protesting intense temperatures at the Olympics. Officials now offering options and experts giving cooling advice to hopefully secure a better outcome.
In Tokyo, Olympians across several sports are raising alarms about the heat hampering their performances. In response, the International Olympic Committee has said they'll back schedule changes whenever possible.
Obviously, a lot of the competition schedule has been built where possible, depending on the sport, to accommodate avoid the hottest parts of the day, but that's not possible with every sport.
Skateboarders who made their Olympic debut on Sunday say they're distracted from their tricks. Tennis players are asking to play in the evening. Ollie J., professor of health and heat at Sydney University, Australia, weighs in. He says research shows ice towels work the best to beat the heat.
So this is where you have damp towels that are filled with 3 kilograms of crushed ice. And then they're taped off at the end and in the middle to stop it moving around. Then they place them around their neck, and that provides a really strong, conductive cooling stimulus around the neck.
Another factor is sweat evaporation. With Tokyo's humidity, this can be a challenge. Toweling off is discouraged as this removes the sweat needed to evaporate to cool the body. Damp towels and fans are suggested instead.
One of the things that we also found that work very well in those type of conditions is the use of electric fans or some kind of something that generates an extra breeze. Because if you increase that airflow across the skin, even in a humid environment, what you actually get is you really accelerate that sweat evaporation, which can be quite effective.
Before the games began, sprinklers were tested to help cool incoming crowds. But amid the city's lockdown, those are no longer needed. For each sport, the corresponding organizations control their competitions. The International Tennis Federation says the wet bulb globe temperature will rule the day. That's a measure of heat in direct sunlight.
And on top of that, there's really extensive heat countermeasures across all of the training and all of the competition. And that has been in place for a number of years, developed through the test events based on feedback, and then generally has been working well across the games so far.
Sunlight and shade are the final factors coming into play in stadiums on top of the weather. The Ariake Urban Sports Park for skateboarding on the Tokyo waterfront is open to the sun, but its lack of cloud cover didn't stop Japan's home team from getting the gold.
Thanks for watching. At NTD, we're honored to be your source for the news. Catch us again tonight at 6:30 Eastern. In New York City, I'm Kevin Hogan.
We have a new channel. Subscribe to us on YouTube at NTD News. Get the highlights of our news broadcast and the most important headlines that we curate especially for you.
Don't let YouTube decide what information you get. That's your choice. YouTube is deleting our videos and cuts you off from a source of honest reporting. Make sure you don't lose access to NTD's news content, and take a quick moment to subscribe to our newsletter so no matter what happens here, you'll keep your access to a trustworthy news source.